Today, let's talk about a railway. Not a high-speed train, not a subway, but a cross-border railway built right through a tropical rainforest. It cuts through hundreds of kilometers of no man's land, with an estimated 80 million unexploded bombs scattered along the route. It connects Kunming in China's Yunnan province with Vientiane, the capital of Laos, stretching 1,035 kilometers. It cost a total of $6 billion. It's called the China-Laos Railway. If you follow international business news, you've probably seen headlines like Laos falls into a Chinese debt trap, or Belt and Road projects leave poor countries with debt they can never repay. These claims sound pretty alarming. But what's the actual truth? Think about it. A country that barely had 7 kilometers of decent railway to its name suddenly gets a standard gauge network running right through it with bullet trains cruising at 160 kilometers an hour. Is the math behind this really that simple? Who actually put up the money? Who is taking the risk? Who's making a profit? And who stands to lose? On the Indochina Peninsula, Laos is completely boxed in by 5 neighbors. China to the north, Vietnam to the east, Cambodia to the south, and Thailand and Myanmar to the west. Not a single inch of coastline. In geopolitics, there's a rather harsh term for a place like this: a landlocked country. Literally locked in by land. What does being locked in actually mean? It means whatever you want to sell, you're at the mercy of your neighbors. Laos has plenty of minerals, rubber, and tropical fruits. But to get these goods to the global market, their only option used to be the highway. And how expensive is cross-border trucking? Try several times more than shipping by sea. Hauling a single ton of minerals from the mountains of Laos to the nearest port in Thailand could easily swallow up most of the profit in shipping costs alone. This created a deeply frustrating bottleneck. The products were great, but by the time they reached the market, the prices were completely uncompetitive globally. So Laos wasn't poor due to a lack of resources. It was poor because it couldn't get those resources out, or at least not at a price that made sense. What's even more absurd is that before construction on the China-Laos Railway began in 2016, the total length of usable railway in the entire country was just 7 kilometers. How short is 7 kilometers? You could ride a shared bike from one end to the other in less than half an hour. And even that was just a dilapidated, narrow gauge track left over from the French colonial era, which was already half paralyzed. You could say this country was completely forgotten by modern industrial logistics networks. It was like a blacklisted phone number. The China-Laos Railway was built to change all that. Stretching 1,035 kilometers from Kunming in China to Vientiane in Laos. It has a design speed of 160 kilometers per hour. This isn't just some ordinary railway. It is Laos's first true physical interface into the global rail network. Building it cost $6 billion for Laos. That is an astronomical figure. In 2020, the entire GDP of Laos was only around $19 billion, meaning $6 billion is roughly a third of its entire economy. By Wall Street's logic, a poor country borrowing an amount equal to a third of its GDP to build a railway is practically financial suicide. Credit rating agencies would downgrade you to junk status in a heartbeat. But reality is far more complex than any financial model. Let's first take a look at how that $6 billion was actually put together. The number one headache the construction crew faced when they arrived on site wasn't landslides, monsoon seasons, or scorching heat. It was bombs. During the Vietnam War, from 1964 to 1973, over 2 million tons of bombs were dropped on Laos. You heard that right. 2 million tons. On average, that's equivalent to a plane dropping bombs on Laotian soil every 8 minutes, around the clock, for 9 years straight. Many of those bombs failed to detonate at the time. They just lay there, buried in the mud and hidden in the jungles. Today, an estimated 80 million of these unexploded bombs remain. 80 million unexploded bombs. Think about that for a second. The route the China-Laos Railway had to cut through happened to be the most heavily bombed area of all. So before a single rail could be laid, the construction crew had to clear the bombs first. Heavy machinery was out of the question because they couldn't risk triggering a chain explosion. It had to be done by hand, technicians sweeping the ground inch by inch with metal detectors. This wasn't just infrastructure development, it was cleaning up a historical mess left behind by others. How much money did bomb clearance cost? How many lives were lost? There's no detailed public data on that, but it required massive amounts of hard cash, and it drove up the project's baseline cost right from day one. With a total price tag of $6 billion, Laos obviously couldn't foot the bill on its own. If the Laotian government had borrowed this money directly under its own name, international rating agencies would have flagged its sovereign debt as unsustainable overnight. Its credit rating would have tanked, making any future financing impossible. That is why a brilliant financial structure had to be designed. The final solution was this. Both sides set up a joint venture called the China-Laos Railway Company Limited, which acted as the main legal entity for the project. China took a 70% stake, while the Laotian government held 30%. The genius of this structure is that the debt doesn't sit directly on Laos's sovereign balance sheet. Instead, it sits within the project company itself. This is a textbook SPV model, a special purpose vehicle. So where did the $6 billion come from? Roughly $3.5 billion came from long-term, low-interest loans provided by the Export-Import Bank of China, and the rest was equity capital from both sides. And for Laos's 30% share, they didn't even pay entirely in cash. Instead, they contributed by leveraging their land use rights along the railway line, concessions for certain mineral resources, and projected tax revenues from the railway's operations over the coming decades. It's basically saying, I don't have the cash right now, but I have land, minerals, and future tax revenue. These things aren't worth much today. But once the railway is running, their value will skyrocket. I'll use these future assets to pay for the railway you're building for me today. How is this a debt trap? This is a textbook asset swap. China provides the funding, technology, and equipment, while Laos provides the land, resources, and market access. Both sides get exactly what they need. Wall Street analysts sitting in their New York offices, clicking away on their keyboards, call it a trap because they've never bothered to calculate one thing once the value of a barren wasteland multiplies tenfold because of a railway. Just how much will that 30% equity in Laos's hands actually be worth? With the deal signed and the funding secured, it was time for the real test on the ground. For the Laotian section of the China-Laos Railway, the bridge-to-tunnel ratio was a staggering 62%. That means for every single kilometer of track, over 600 meters consisted of either a bridge or a tunnel. What does that actually mean? It means that most of the time, the machinery, materials, and workers weren't operating on flat ground. They were boring through mountains and throwing bridges over roaring rivers. The ultimate nightmare for the engineers was the Anding Tunnel. Stretching over 17 kilometers, its length wasn't even the scariest part. The real terror was the geological layer it had to pierce through. Grade V soft rock. Simply put, the rock there wasn't solid. It was soft. Under immense tectonic stress, it would deform and literally flow, behaving like an incredibly slow, moving wall of mud. In the toughest section, the Huai Fulai Tunnel, this soft rock deformed by up to 10 centimeters a day. Let that sink in. You spend all day painstakingly digging a section out, reinforcing it with steel arches, spraying concrete, and then you head home to sleep. The next morning, you walk back in only to find the mountain has quietly squeezed your tunnel 10 centimeters narrower. If your digging slowed down even a fraction, the mountain would literally swallow the space right back up. This wasn't just construction. This was a turf war against a living mountain. How do you beat geology like that? The China Railway team utilized a parallel pilot tunnel technique. In short, they dug multiple channels simultaneously, trading space for time while constantly tweaking their concrete formulas to force a rigid, solid pipe to set right inside that moving mud. None of these maneuvers were in any textbook. Every single one was figured out through sheer grit and brute force experimentation on site. Then came the bridges. The Luang Prabang Mekong River Bridge stretches 1,458 meters. The Mekong experiences ferocious seasonal floods every year, meaning underwater foundation work could only be crammed into a tight window during the dry season. The project management put operations into a 24/7 high saturation overdrive, running double or even triple shifts without stopping. They managed to slash 7 months off the schedule. They weren't doing this to win awards. They did it because missing that dry season window and dragging into the next monsoon meant project costs would spiral completely out of control. At this point, we have to talk about China's engineering hardware. The only reason these bridge and tunnel projects could push forward with such intensity and speed is China's decades of accumulated expertise in heavy machinery. The tunnel boring machines, hydraulic drilling rigs, and heavy-duty bridge erectors capable of running non-stop in 40-degree heat and 90% humidity weren't rented. They were made in China. This is the raw, overflowing capability of Chinese enterprise. There was no need to import high-priced equipment from Germany or Japan. China builds it natively. That keeps costs way down and slashes project timelines significantly. You don't see this kind of advantage at a negotiating table, but out on the construction site, it is the exact factor that decides whether a railway gets finished or becomes an abandoned, half-baked mess. The railway was finished, the trains were running, but a brilliant piece of black comedy instantly stared everyone right in the face. China, just like Europe and North America, uses standard gauge tracks where the distance between the rails is exactly 1,435 millimeters. To hook into China's massive network, Laos built its entire line to standard gauge as well, but Laos's neighbors, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, they use meter gauge tracks, which are only 1,000 millimeters wide. Why the difference? Because back in the day, British and French colonialists intentionally laid narrow tracks to cut costs. So here's the catch. Trains coming from China arrive in Vientiane and hit a complete dead end. The tracks are misaligned by exactly 43.5 centimeters, about the length of an adult man's foot. If you can't solve this, Vientiane remains a logistical cul-de-sac. But capital has a unique trait. It doesn't complain about bottlenecks. It capitalizes on them. Right in the southern suburbs of Vientiane, hugging the Thai-Laos border, a $100 million project materialized the Thanalang Dry Port. The play here is brutally simple. A standard gauge cargo train from China rolls in and parks on one side. A meter gauge train from Thailand pulls up on the other. Dozens of gantry cranes in the port swing into action. Mechanical arms grab the shipping containers, shift them 43.5 centimeters through thin air, and set them smoothly down onto the Thai train. The entire process takes just minutes. This exact 43.5 centimeter physical mismatch was transformed into a monopolistic logistical toll booth. Every single piece of cargo moving north or south has to stop here to switch tracks. Every time a container is lifted and shifted, it generates a service fee, a storage fee, and a customs clearance fee. Within 3 years of Vientiane dry port going live, the import tariffs and logistical revenue pocketed by the Laotian government from this single hub skyrocketed by nearly 200%. This is the chain reaction triggered by a major power's overflowing industrial capacity. China's standard gauge rails forced a logistical node into existence, and that node became the most stable cash cow for the Laotian government. A 43.5-centimeter gap that was once a dead end is now a gravitational toll station, and this economic gravity is highly contagious. Thailand had been sitting on the fence for years about whether to upgrade its own rail network to standard gauge. After all, when you're looking at a $10 billion price tag, you think twice. But fast forward to January 2026. A batch of fresh shrimp, harvested and frozen in southern Thailand, swapped tracks seamlessly at the Vientiane port. In less than 5 hours, they were sitting fresh on restaurant tables in Kunming and Chengdu, slashing shipping time by 60% compared to traditional sea freight. When policymakers in Bangkok saw those metrics, the math clicked instantly. If they stubbornly clung to their narrow gauge, Thailand's fresh seafood, fruits, and electronics would get choked at the Vientiane toll station. Meanwhile, competing goods from Vietnam and Laos, armed with standard gauge efficiency, would absolutely obliterate Thai products in the market. Industrial hollow. Out is no joke. So, in 2026, the Thai government bit the bullet and greenlit phase I of the Nong Khai high-speed rail project. A $10 billion bet to lay standard gauge tracks and erect a brand new railway bridge, welding Vientiane and Bangkok together with a continuous 1,435-millimeter ribbon of steel. Their target is to completely erase that 43.5-centimeter gap by 2028. Bangkok realized one thing very clearly. Instead of letting Vientiane sit there collecting tolls forever, it was time to join the game. Much of the Laotian section of the China-Laos Railway snakes through uninhabited virgin rainforests. The mountains are steep, the jungle is dense, and once the monsoon season hits, landslides and mudslides are as common as breakfast. Operating trains in a place like this by relying on human track inspections and the driver's naked eyes is a recipe for a major disaster sooner or later. That's why this railway was born with a built-in digital nervous system. Huawei teamed up with China Railway Electrification Bureau to blanket the entire line with an industrial-grade private 5G network. And don't assume this 5G is just for scrolling through TikTok. It serves as the digital bedrock for the railway's full life cycle asset management. In the landslide-prone sections of Udomse province, thousands of IoT sensors are buried beneath the tracks and embedded into the retaining walls. Even if a minute shift of just a few millimeters occurs deep inside the mountain or a few pebbles hit the protective netting, the resulting vibration waves are transmitted within milliseconds via the 5G network straight to AI command centers in Vientiane and Kunming. AI algorithms instantly determine whether it's just normal settling or a precursor to a massive landslide. If it's the latter, an alert is pinged directly to the cockpit of the oncoming train. What's the real significance of a system like this? It flips safety from being a cost center into a profit center. Think about it. If a freight train packed with high-end electronics derails in the middle of a remote jungle due to a landslide and halts operations for 3 days, the delayed delivery compensation, supply chain penalties, and surging insurance premiums could easily stack up to tens of millions of dollars. Worse yet, a single major accident shatters the commercial credibility of the entire railway, causing future insurance premiums to skyrocket overnight. Yet from 2025 into 2026, the China-Laos Railway maintained virtually zero operational disruptions. This pristine track record has earned it rock bottom premium rates in the international logistics insurance market, all backed by this invisible digital nervous system. Then there's customs clearance. In the past, at the Mohan port on the China-Laos border, a single truck could take up to 40 hours to clear customs. You'd fill out paper forms, wait in line, wait for stamps, buy a box lunch, and wait some more. Today, a digitized clearance system paired with robotic undercarriage scanners has compressed that window down to just 2.5 hours. That is an 800% surge in customs efficiency in cross-border logistics. Time is literally money. Cutting out a single day of waiting means capital turns over 1 day faster. And let's talk about environmental protection. A lot of people think going green is just spending money to buy a good reputation. But on this railway, eco-protection offers a direct financial return. Over 3 million square meters of vegetation were restored along the route, and over 60 kilometers of ecological fencing were erected to protect Asian elephants. This wasn't some dressing stunt staged for international NGOs. Restoring vegetation anchors the soil, preventing erosion from washing away the rail beds, which drastically slashes long-term maintenance costs. Furthermore, compared to highway trucking, rail transport slashes carbon emissions per ton of cargo by a flat 30%. In today's 2026 landscape of global carbon tariffs, that 30% reduction can be converted into carbon credits to be sold on international markets, translating into hard cash that can directly offset financing interest. Chinese enterprises have accumulated massive technical expertise in this arena, from alpine permafrost to tropical rainforests. Ecological restoration is no longer a pure expenditure. It's an asset bundled directly into the project's overall yield. The trains are rolling and the cargo is moving. But if we only look at the physical goods, we are missing the bigger picture. The real chemical reaction of this railway is that it is carrying China's industrial capacity straight down the tracks and into the heart of Laos. Just outside Vientiane lies the Sasetha Development Zone. A decade ago, this was nothing but a barren tropical wasteland with an unstable power grid. Today, powered by the stable, low-cost cross-border logistics of the railway, it is packed to the brim with factories. From manufacturing solar modules and biopharmaceuticals to assembling smart home appliances, hundreds of finished industrial products are hitting global markets stamped with a brand new label, Made in Laos. For the first time in its history, Laos doesn't have to rely solely on exporting raw timber, unprocessed ores, or fresh produce to survive. It is integrating into the global industrial supply chain. Granted, it's still in the early stages of processing and assembly, but taking this single leap fundamentally changes the game. Where factories go, land values follow. The land surrounding Vientiane used to offer zero capital premium. It was good for growing sticky rice and harvesting rubber. And that was about it. But the empty plots around the rail stations have transformed into prime real estate overnight in the eyes of logistics giants and industrial developers. The fiscal revenue generated by this soaring land value provides the Laotian government with a crucial stream of funding to pay down its railway loans and bankroll further development. This is the textbook playbook of using rails to fund growth and land to fund rails. China knows this strategy inside out, and now that exact expertise is being duplicated in Laos. Then there's a very practical reality: manpower. For the China-Laos Railway to operate long-term, you can't continuously fly in drivers and engineers from China. The overhead is simply too high. That is why, right from the jump, China has been systematically training local Laotian talent. Take a 24-year-old Laotian youth named Samse. 5 years ago, he couldn't even read a basic circuit diagram for an electric locomotive. But after undergoing comprehensive technical training and rigorous hands-on drills from China, he now leads a local team of nearly 1,000 workers. He sits confidently in the cockpit of the Lane Zhang bullet train, cruising at 160 kilometers an hour across his own homeland. This isn't just some heartwarming feel-good story. It is a cold, calculated mathematical equation. The long-term marginal cost of employing a local Laotian driver is just 1/3 of exporting a Chinese driver. Transferring the technology and cultivating a homegrown team is the ultimate guarantee that this cross-border asset can retain its value and sustain low-cost, localized operations over the long haul. For Laos, these young people are the most valuable asset this railway will ever leave behind. Concrete infrastructure will eventually depreciate. But the skills, discipline, and industrial mindset drilled into an entire generation, that never depreciates. The China-Laos Railway is not an isolated project. It is the very first segment, and the most difficult one, of the central route of the Pan-Asian Railway network. Looking south, Thailand's Nong Khai-Bangkok high-speed rail has already been greenlit, a $10 billion injection set to link up by 2028. Further south, the Malaysia East Coast Rail Link, also built by Chinese enterprises and also standard gauge, is currently over 92% complete, forging its way down the eastern coast of the Malay Peninsula. And its ultimate destination, Singapore. When you splice all these pieces together, you get a continuous 3,000-kilometer standard gauge steel artery running from Kunming, China, straight through Vientiane, Bangkok, and Kuala Lumpur, all the way to Singapore. Think about the gravity of this. For the very first time in human history, a high-speed overland transit corridor blanketing the entire Indochina Peninsula has been physically unlocked. For centuries, Southeast Asia's trade lifeblood has been tethered to the Strait of Malacca. Every mass commodity, shipping container, and energy shipment had to squeeze through that narrow bottleneck. Efficiency, security, and pricing power. None of it belonged to the nations themselves. The triumph of the China-Laos Railway proves one thing: when your industrial muscle and engineering prowess are powerful enough, you can use steel and concrete to forge a brand new transit corridor right out of thin air on land. You can literally suck high-value cargo away from the traditional sea lanes and onto the rails. This isn't about replacing maritime shipping, it's about providing a backup option. And for landlocked nations shut out from the oceans for centuries, this is the physical rewriting of Destiny Laos. A country that once sat as a geographical black hole without even 7 kilometers of railway, has transformed into the overland transit hub of the entire peninsula. That is exactly what $6 billion bought. Wall Street calls it debt. Vientiane calls it an entry ticket. What Chinese engineers and enterprises delivered on this railway wasn't just a completed construction checklist. It was a blueprint, a repeatable, exportable model of cross-border infrastructure paired with industrial synergy. Today, this exact playbook is rolling out across construction sites in Thailand and tunnels in Malaysia. If standard gauge rails can pierce through the brutal, unforgiving peaks of the Indochina Peninsula, what about the deeper barriers? What about the straits that sever continent from continent? As the tunnel boring machines and immersed tube technologies in the hands of Chinese engineers are sharpened to a razor edge inside the tunnels of Laos, will the deep oceans, nature's final frontier, truly remain a barrier forever, driven by capital, engineering, and the raw instinct for survival? Humanity's push to reshape the Earth's surface and rewire global connectivity has only just entered its second half. The story of Laos is merely the opening act.